Welcome, GBA fans, to the Week 1 preview for Season 10 of the GBA. I am joined by none other than Gym Leader Gio. How's it going, Gio?
It's amazing. Aster, thank you for having me on the show. Really excited to be looking at this and getting some prep talk underway.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't own the show, but it's nice to have you here regardless.
I accept that you have invited me to be your partner here as carte blanche that you are the owner of this show.
Fantastic. All right.
Definitely it is a shared ownership.
Yep. All right, so I'm claiming ownership of this show, and we are going to start by reviewing our Week 1 matchups. Our first matchup on deck is going to be the Bullet Punch Club, who are receiving the Copenhagen Sawsbucks. So, of course, we do have our home and away system this season, and the home team for this matchup is going to be the Bullet Punch Club. Looking at some of the mons here, so we have Gholdengo, we have Dragonite. On the other side, we have big threats like Iron Bundle and even the Zoroark. And one mon that sticks out to me in particular is Talonflame, at how devastating it can be to the opposing team, just spamming Banded Brave Birds, getting off Will-O-Wisps if it wants to run a more defensive set. It's actually very difficult to check. I've seen Gholdengos check Talonflames that don't bring a fire move because you literally can't touch the Gholdengo, so that might be something that Uzi wants to do, but what are your takes on it?
Well, I'm seeing right away. So home with Bullet Punch Club, they're bringing a lot of opportunity for some pretty powerful priority, and obviously not taking away from the fact that we got Talonflame on the other end of that. But strong priority brings a huge advantage here that can kind of patch up some of the speed tiering that we're seeing there. Sawsbucks, of course, got two different mons that are kind of paving the way for that speed matchup. Fastest one that Bullet Punch Club has being at 123. I think that's gonna spell for a little bit of a problem in the speed war for Bullet Punch Club, but I love the power of Bullet Punch Club. I love Dragonite in draft format. I think he's actually absolutely phenomenal. The Talonflame, I love the value that Talonflame gets, and absolutely something that he's gonna have to prepare for.
Yeah, if not for the Talonflame, honestly, the Meowscarada goes unchecked with its dual stab plus Play Rough, which could have been an issue. Using a Choice Scarf would have mitigated the speed problem. Of course, you have to watch out for Scarfs on the opposing end. Talonflame is never running a Choice Scarf, but Iron Bundle definitely could into this matchup. So that's definitely something that Uzi's going to have to watch out for. So yeah, moving on to our next matchup. Here we have the Edmonton Coilers receiving the New York Empoleon. So Goldoa going over to Dell's court. And as expected, we do see the Iron Valiant be able to put in a lot of work here, especially into some of Goldoa's top mons.
The one thing I noticed right away is the Empoleons, they've got a lot of defensive and bulky threats that can really cause a problem and kind of stop some of these potential sweeps, but with all of those, there come glaring weaknesses. And actually looking at this matchup, be on the lookout for how the Coilers can really set up against some of these more passive threats that might not be able to present the same kind of halt to a sweep that you would see in other mons.
Yeah, I agree. Something like the Fortress is definitely abusable. You also have Mew, which has no recovery, so that could be something that you could set up on for sure. One problem that I do see with the Coilers team, though, is that their defensive options are very streamlined, easy to work around, especially with something as scary as Terastallized Ceruledge on the other side. So that's going to be something that Dell definitely has to watch out for. Owen in his corner, I think they're going to be able to prep well enough for this matchup, but it's definitely not going to be easy. They're outsped at the highest speed tier, and without booster energy, of course, coming into account. And yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's definitely going to be a tough matchup. This is definitely going to be one to watch this week. All right, and coming up next, we have the San Francisco Arcaniners receiving the Borussia Donphan. So a vet matchup here. Of course, George and Lars have been here a long time. George coming in with his wacky team with the double fires up at the top, and Lars has also one of the scariest Terra combinations in the entire league between Salamence and the Volcanion. So not too sure. I think the fire types are actually really good here looking at it, other than into the Volcanion. Of course, Terra mitigates that with Volcarona, but what are you seeing?
So right out the gate, Lars has really got a lot of very top tier threats. His team is terrifying on paper. You said it right now, that he's got a strong combination of terrestrialization options. I think the double fire type, I mean, Haydunn and George really bringing some heat here. But what they have to look out for is some pretty significant bulk options that they've got. You got Cresselia, which is really always going to be something that you have to prep to be able to get around. Chi-Yu, of course, is absolutely devastating, but I think between the combination of Volcanion, Iron Treads, you're seeing Cresselia there, there's a lot of defensive options. It's going to be very difficult for the Arcaniners to get around.
Yeah, outside of the Tinkaton, honestly, the Cresselia kind of just goes crazy with Calm Mind Psyshock. It almost forces the Volcarona to bring Bug Buzz, which it otherwise wouldn't want to bring into this matchup, as Fire plus whatever Terra type it uses to cover the Volcanion would usually be enough. Probably Terra Ground here, as it also hits Treads, etc. But yeah, the forcing of the bring of the Tinkaton, just Cress's presence alone is going to be pretty significant here. It's going to be interesting to see how George manages with this very odd team structure that he's drafted. We might even see the Rillaboom Hawlucha come out to play here, because that is also looking quite dangerous across the entirety of Lars's team. He doesn't really have a solid check to fighting plus acro coverage, so yeah, it's gonna be a cool one. And our fourth matchup here. Now, these are two teams that I really praised during the draft for having really solid drafts overall, really threatening drafts. We have the Atlanta Victinis against the Chicago Dragapults, and I'm really excited to see the Atlanta Victinis team in action. I think that defensively, they pretty much have all bases covered. You struggle to find somewhere to crack the team. Of course, Iron Moth does look a little bit scary, especially with Terra. Factor that in with Psychic as coverage, right? That could be a little bit dangerous for the Victinis. But other than that, I think they have a really solid core into almost anything that they're going to face off against. Gonna have to watch out for Dragapult's speed as well. That thing can obviously run very dangerous sets, a plethora of sets, really. Anything else that you see here?
Yeah, what I first noticed right away, there's a lot of give and take between these two teams, between the Victinis and the Dragapults, especially looking at the speed tier. You got the fastest Mon, of course, in this matchup, being Dragapult there with the 142. Then you look at the Victinis, and we've got 121. Then you look back at the away 110. Then back at the Victinis, 105. But then the Victinis have the third. When you start playing with speed tiers like that, you end up with a lot of changing of the EV breakdowns of the Mons, and that actually plays a really significant factor when you're deciding whether to min-max something, play things a little bit on the bulkier side. Of course, you need to prepare in a matchup like this to the fact that the Dragapults have an astoundingly high attack stat average across all of their Mons. So do you have to force your team to go a little bit more defensive in order to kind of prepare for that? A lot of bulk, a lot of defensive forte as well, coming from the Dragapults there, and looking at how each team is going to prepare for that. Victinis using what they can to their advantage to try and take down what is otherwise like a very scary team with a lot of really strong threats.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget there is a Trick Room option here with Namarus T and the Iron Hands posing serious threats. If you do decide to go for a fully defensive structure, you risk not being able to damage those Mons enough when they do come in to try to take KOs for free if they're Choice Specs or Choice Band respectively. So definitely a lot to think about here for the Victinis, but I'm excited to see what they can do with this really cool team structure. Moving on, the Calgary Flamethrowers, our newest addition to the GBA Season 10, are receiving the San Diego Snugglers. D.Rey coming in on an away game, and once again, two very interesting teams. D.Rey's, I'm kind of just looking at Palafin, right? But on the other side, we got some really cool options here between Shedtail, which I believe is actually banned, never mind. But we do have Chilly Reception into Baxcalibur, as well as screens from the Grimmsnarl with Parting Shot out into major threats like Ursaluna, and even something like a Bulk Up Quaquaval, right? These are all very dangerous threats into D.Rey's team. Rotom almost has to come for the Quack and the just spamming of Headlong Rush really from the Ursaluna. And yeah, there's not a lot of switch-ins to a lot of these dangerous threats from the home team here. But what are your thoughts? Do you think the Palafin can pull it through, or?
See, I was thinking the exact same thing. As we're kind of looking at this, both teams, actually, I would say, similarly to how you're talking about the Flamethrowers here, both teams have the type of offensive threats that are very difficult to deal with. Palafin, once we get it activated, Annihilate once he gets going, really, truly very dangerous mons. And then when you look over, Excalibur is something that can absolutely go crazy. Quaquaval, same kind of thing, absolutely can go crazy. And you look at some of the support options that they brought here, and not a lot of them necessarily can deal with these on their own. Yeah. So it's likely to be something that we throw multiple threats, multiple defensive mon, multiple options and checks at. But ultimately, I think those mons can both kind of go crazy there. So really interested to see how they play the Gothitelle, to see if they can shut down some of those threats and take those away. But Ursaluna, terrifying. Excalibur, terrifying. Palafin, terrifying. Annihilate, terrifying. A lot of options there for both teams.
Yeah, it's kind of rough with the Gothitelle, as most of the things that you'd want to be trapping have some sort of pivoting option, whether it be U-turn, parting shot, chilly reception, volt switch. It's a little bit rough to bring, but you did make a good point that the two top offensive options on either side kind of have to like get one free turn, and then suddenly they're major threats, being the Palafin, the Annihilate on the away side, and on the home side, we have the Excalibur and the Ursaluna, which needs to pop its Flame Orb to be able to really do anything. But I've seen Ursaluna do a lot of work even without the Guts boost. So that's something to keep in mind, of course. And Annihilate itself can just as easily be a Final Gambit set or a Choice Scarf set. So yeah, a lot of things to think about in this one. This is going to be a very difficult matchup to dissect for our coaches. And finally, our last matchup is going to feature GeneralTarheel, Play More Esports, receiving the Wolverhampton Weaviles, just Weavile. Yeah, the Roaring Moon, the Sun, up against the plethora of what is it, booster mons on the other side. So the Sun could come into, it could really be detrimental to GeneralTarheel's team here. So much so that I don't even think the Torkoal comes to this matchup.
Yeah, I would be really surprised if it did. The benefits that Play More Esports gets from this is not worth the risk of what it could possibly do to buff up the Weaviles and their insane threats. I mean, look at how well this team is put together. So many really devastating mons. You got Great Tusk, you got Walking Wake, Iron Leaves, all their very scary mons. You packed it up with some amazing offensive picks here with Gengar. I mean, I'm just terrified just looking at this team. I think it's so well drafted and something that's going to be really difficult to prep for Play More Esports and GeneralTarheel.
One thing I will say is that Hisuian Samurott has very few checks, and the Terramon that you'd want to run here, being Terra Frostmoth actually, with Terra Ground, does not appreciate Aqua Jet. Coming from the Samurott, so it's hard to get off a sweep, so you're almost forced into a position where you have to terastallize the Iron Leaves instead, which is really underwhelming, because you look at Frostmoth and it just tears the entire team apart. If it gets to be a ground type with Ice Beam and Terra Blast, but it can't really do that because of the Samurott. So do the Weaviles find a way to stop the Samurott and enable the Frostmoth, or do they go with the safer option of the terastallized Iron Leaves? I almost said Virizion as I was looking at it. Really does look like Virizion.
Metal Virizion.
Yeah. So yeah, that's gonna be tough. And another interesting threat from the other side is actually the Kilowattrel, which forces the bring of the Rotom Heat almost, because it kind of just clicks buttons. Otherwise, it's the fastest thing in the matchup. So I mean, the Roaring Moon, of course, is very fast in its own right, but definitely a lot of things to consider here for the Weaviles. It's not going to be an easy one. Anyway, GBA fans, that's going to wrap it up for your Week 1 preview. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to sub to the GBA channel, as well as all of the coaches in the description down below. Thank you for joining me here, Gio, this week. There's very high likelihood that Gio and I may not return to this series in future weeks, but if we do come back, then I hope you will all receive us with open arms, loving arms. And we very much appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day.